Hello, my name is Magnus Krona. I'm a senior developer at Weavy. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the Telerik Xamarin UI controls together with Weavy to create a chat app. We are also going to talk about topics like authentication, the Weavy API, the Weavy real-time capabilities, and of course the Telerik UI controls we are going to use in the demo. All the code is available at github.com/Weavy. We also have a Weavy instance up and running for you at showcase.weavycloud.com that contains all the APIs we have created for this demo. So first off, authentication. Before you can make a request to the Weavy APIs you have created, you have to authenticate, of course. And there are basically two ways you can do this. It's either token-based or cookie-based. In this demo, we are going to use token-based. So token-based authentication, this is where you create a JWT, which is a token containing user claims such as user ID, username, email, and so on. And you also have to specify the Weavy authentication client ID and sign the token with the Weavy authentication client secret. When you have this token, you need to pass it in as a bearer token to each request you do to the Weavy API. So what is the Weavy API? Well, it's actually not that much when you set up a new instance of Weavy. We only have the most basic and fundamental APIs like user management. You can create and update the spaces, apps, and content, of course. But we don't have an API for everything you can do in Weavy. Instead, we allow you, the developers, to create your own APIs for exactly what you need in your app. So in this demo, for example, we have where we are going to create a chat application. We are going to make use of the Weavy conversational and message capabilities and create the APIs we need. So next up, the Weavy real-time. So Weavy has some real-time capabilities. When something happens in Weavy, for example, a user signs in, or a content item is updated, or a file is uploaded, and so on, there is a corresponding real-time event pushed out to all the users that have access to that information. We are using Signal R to broadcast the messages over a WebSocket. We have a hub called RTM that you can connect to and start listening to messages. In this demo, we are going to use the real-time capabilities to listen for new messages in a conversation. We are also going to use it to listen for when a user is typing a new message to display a typing indicator. So last up, the Telerik Controls. We are going to use the list view control to display a list of users' conversation in the app. We are also going to use the autocomplete view, which we are going to use when we create a new conversation. So when we create a new conversation, we want to be able to add new participants. And we are going to search the Weavy instance for users, and we are going to display them as we type in the autocomplete view. And last, of course, the conversational UI component, which is the actual chat component displaying the messages. And this is also where you can type and add a new message. Okay, so let's dive into the code. Here I have Visual Studio, and this is the Weavy Telerik chat project available at GitHub. And let's take a look at the structure of this solution first. We have a core project where all the models and services and view models are, and also the application start. We have a project for Android and iOS, and today I'm going to show you the Android version. We also have a UI project which contains the pages and views. And as a side note here, I am using a MVVM framework here called MVVM Cross. So MVVM stands for Model View Model, which is a design pattern that fits very well when creating Xamarin apps. So you don't have to use these kind of frameworks, but it's very nice and very easy to use view models, handle navigation, dependency injection, and so on. But as I said, it's not necessary. So let's take a look at some important things here. So we have a constant class here in the core project, and we have a root URL. So this is where you specify which Weavy instance we are going to use. And as I said, we have an instance up and running. This is for your convenience for these demos, so you don't have to create a local instance. It's available at showcase.weavycloud.com. You can also specify a client ID and a client secret for the Weavy Authentication clients. But in this demo, we have actually created a couple of predefined JWTs for 4 different users actually. And this is also for your convenience, so you don't have to think too much about the authentication part here. And so let's take a look at the actual app. So if I go back here, we have the application we are going to build, or the application I'm going to show you how it's built. This is the home page or start page where we have a list of conversations, and here we are using the Telerik list view control to display all the active conversation for the current logged in user. So we have, as you can see, we have both one-to-one conversations, but also one-to-many or rooms, as we call them in Weavy. We can see that we are displaying the name of the conversation, also the last received message and when it was received. We can create a new conversation by tapping on the new button in the upper right corner. And of course, we can click on a conversation to go to the actual chat. And this is the Telerik conversation UI component, displaying the messages and also displaying a text input and a send button. So let's take a look how we render the home page and get the conversations. If we go to the pages here, we can see we have a home page. And as you can see, we are using the list view here. And for each item in the list, we are rendering it with a custom cell called conversation cell. If you go to the view model, which is the home view model, and we scroll down to the prepare method, which is a method you can override in the MVVM cross framework here, which is run before the view is displayed. So the important part here is the load conversation bit. So we take a look here, we can see that when we're doing a load conversation, we are calling the conversation service. So let's take a look at the conversation service. Here I have built a conversation service, and you can see here in the get we are actually calling the REST service, get async, and we're passing in an endpoint or a resource here, which is API conversations. So let's take a look at the REST service. As you can see in the constructor here, we are creating a new HTTP client, and we are using the constant root URL as the base address. And this is, as I said before, pointing to showcase.weavycloud.com. We are also setting the authorization header, the bearer token here, to something happen here in token service, generate token. So let's take a look at that. And this is what I said before. We have 4 predefined hard-coded JWTs. So this is only for demo purposes, of course. These are long-lived tokens. You should, of course, create short-lived tokens on the fly here in a real application. I have also made an example down here how you can create real tokens. And as you can see, we are passing in the constant client ID, which was the client ID to the Weavy authentication client, and we are using the client secret to encode it. Okay, so back to the REST service and the get async. We are doing an async request to the resource, which is API/conversations. And this API endpoint is nothing that exists when you create a new instance of Weavy. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go over to another instance of Visual Studio where I have the Weavy Showcase solution. And this is also available at GitHub, as I said before. So let's go down here to Areas, API Controllers, and here we have the Conversations controller. And this is something we have created for this demo and to be able to create the chat application. And as you can see here, we have the route conversations. This is what we are doing a request to. And here we're using the Weavy conversation service, which is part of the service layer in Weavy. And we're doing a search, and this will return all the active conversation for the current signed in user. We're just returning them. So back here, if we go back now to the home view model, we are getting a list of conversations, and we are simply looping over the conversation and adding them to the list variable, which is an observable collection bound to the Telerik list view control. So when this is updated, the UI is updated as well. And the messages, the conversations are displayed here. So what we want to do next is we want to be able to click here on a conversation and display the messages. So let's see how this is made. So let's head over to the conversation view model. This is the view model used on the conversation page. This one also have a prepare method, and we are doing load messages with the conversation that is passed in to the view model. So let's go down here, and we can see that we are using the conversation service here that we created in the app, and we are calling get messages. And this is very similar to the get conversations. We are getting the messages from the Weavy instance, and we are looping over the messages and adding them to the messages collection, which is an observable collection bound to the control. And the control in this case is the Telerik UI, conversational UI control. So let's take a look at the conversation page. Here we can see that we are using the conversational UI component, the chat. We are specifying the item source to the messages collection. So if we go back to the app, we can see that this is what it looks like. The UI component is rendering the messages, and we have an input and a send button here at the bottom. So we want to be able to type a new message and send a message, of course. So let's go back to control. We can see that we are binding a method called send message command to the send message command on the chat component. So in the conversation view model, if we scroll up a bit, we have our send message. This is basically doing a call to the send message on the conversation service, and we are passing in the ID of the conversation and the actual message. So as we can see here, we are constructing a JSON from the text we are sending, and then we are doing a request to the API conversation. We're passing in the current conversation ID, and if we go back to the showcase Visual Studio instance here and scroll down a bit, we can see that here we have the route conversation ID messages. We are getting a model of the incoming message, and we are using the Weavy message service .insert and creating the new message. So it's added to the conversation. So next up, the Weavy real-time capabilities. As I promised before, we are going to use some real-time capabilities here as well. So if we go back to the home view model, maybe you notice that on the prepare, we also did a hub service connect. So what is this? If we go to the hub service, you can see that this takes care of the connection to the Signal R hub. In the connect, we are doing a new hub connection to the root URL, which is, again, to showcase.weavycloud.com in this case. We are passing in a bearer token here as well to authenticate ourselves. And then we are creating a hub proxy from the hub called RTM in Weavy, which is our real-time hub. We are setting it to a public variable called proxy, so we can access it later on. And then we start the connection. So, for example, in the home view model, or as maybe I should go to the conversation view model instead here, it's better. We can see that in the view appeared here, we are adding an event listener to the proxy and listening for an event called event received. And this is the name of all the messages broadcasted from Weavy. And then we can see on which type it is. And in this case, we are only interested in typing and message inserted. So here in the message inserted, for example, we are receiving the messages or the message. We are just doing a quick check to see that the message belongs to the active conversation we are looking at in the app, and then we add it to the messages collection. And when it's added, the UI is updated with the new message. So this is basically what I wanted to show you here today. As I said, all the code is available at GitHub, and you can also find the tutorial for this video at docs.weavy.com. Thank you very much.